right, let's go. On the court with Adam Wedlake, executive position member with Basketball Manitoba. Adam, good morning. Thanks for joining me real quick.
Hey,
how's August shaped up so far?
Well, it's a busy month, probably the busiest August we've had in a number of years. Big one coming up this Friday, 2 days from now, with Team Canada here in town with hosting Team Nigeria. The first time we've seen the Canadian national men's team here in 20 years, almost at the day. Last time they were here was for the 1999 Pan Am Games, which feels like forever ago. So it's wonderful to see them back.
Absolutely. I mean, last month in July, we were embraced with the presence of NBA champion Danny Green. Now we get to see the highlight of all of the Canadian, or most of the Canadian members of Basketball Canada. A couple of missing players due to injury. How exciting is this game going to be on Friday for those watching it at Bell MTS Place?
Well, what's super about it is we're luckily enough to have there's only two games that they're playing total this summer here in Canada. One's in Toronto tonight at the Mattamy Center. That's their opening game against Nigeria as well. And then we're lucky enough 2 days later from today to house them here. So, yeah, we're very unique and been very excited to have this. If a year ago you were to tell me that in this coming year we would see the Raptors win the NBA championship, we would have a Raptor, and you said Danny Green here a few weeks later to host a players camp and then to host the national men's team here, all within about a 2-month span. I thought I would say you would have been crazy. So it's definitely been an unexpected whirlwind summer, spring, summer for basketball, and it's exciting to be part of it.
And it's exciting for the younger players too, because they get to see the national role models and those that have grown up in Canada to play basketball. We didn't have that 20 years ago. I mean, like you mentioned, the last time the Pan American Games and Team Canada was assembled, and over the last 25 years, 35 years, the game has evolved in Canada so that we're seeing players now like RJ Barrett, drafted in the top 5, going to D1 schools. How impressive is that for young Canadian basketball players to see Canadian content now in Division 1, strong youth sports here in Canada? I mean, there's great players staying in Canada as well. How impressive is that as role models for younger players to see?
Well, that's huge. And really, if you go back in those sort of in the last generation here, and again, you can use things like when the Toronto Raptors arrived on scene. Again, the Pan Am Games was 4 years later, and there's been another number of other key events, sort of high water marks, and we'll definitely look at 2019 with those things you mentioned, plus a few other things that are happening, as one of those things that push the bar up in our sport. You can go back in time and look at previous sort of motivating factors. Steve Nash being a big part of that over the last, say, 20 years, and his ascent into the NBA. And Vince Carter with the Raptors. But again, we're talking like those are like one person at a time. We're now looking at multiple athletes, multiple people, personalities that are taking that bar and really taking us to the next level. So it's not really relying on one set of shoulders. That's what's really exciting, is to see a wide range of people that are really taking our game to the next level.
And it's not just one style of player. I mean, you look at Steve Nash being that perennial guard MVP, 2-time MVP, and McCullough back in the days when he played with University of Winnipeg. He was a big guy. Like, he was 7-footer doing this thing with the Sixers. So, I mean, we're seeing guards, we're seeing power forwards, we're seeing shooters, we're seeing guys beyond the arc. So every player is really being, taken care of, so to speak, with a role model aspect.
Yeah, it's really the depth. It's the depth of our the base that's really growing out there, and that's really been seen over. Again, you can probably even just go back over the last 5 years, and really all it does, and how many players here potentially in Manitoba that could break into that stratosphere is obviously still to be known. You mentioned Todd McCullough. He holds the I guess. The status of being the only Manitoban drafted in the NBA, and that again goes back over 20 years now. That was in 1999, actually 20 years ago when he was drafted. So we're looking to see a lot of those players that are out there today to be the motivating factor. Where in 15 years, a young player from Manitoba can look back and say, yeah, it was back in 2019. I was able to see my first national team game at the Bell MTS Place, and that gave me lit the spark inside me, and that was able to get me to where I am today. So this is where we sort of look back at certain things that are again, like I said, high water marks for our sport.
So Friday night, 7 p.m. tip-off, just after 7 o'clock. Canada versus Nigeria. Do we know how ticket sales have been? Is it something that's going to be well attended by a lot of the patrons here in Manitoba?
Yeah, we're very excited to see the number of people that have come forward. It was a nice big rush at the start when the game was announced in April for us, and then it's been a nice steady growth. There's always that last second tickets that are always available. So again, Ticketmaster is your place to find that, or at the door. But yeah, Friday at 7 o'clock tip at Bell MTS Place. The only time you'll see Canada. Again, we're hoping that it's not going to be another 20 years drought between seeing that team come through the city here. But again, these kind of things are far and few between, unfortunately. So it definitely, anybody who's watching wants to get some good basketball this summer, this is the place to be.
For sure. So tickets available at the door, online as well. Will the players be available at all before or after the game, or is it something just strictly game and that's it?
It's pretty much just the game. It's a pretty whirlwind stop. They get in here late tomorrow night, Thursday night, and they play the game on. They have a game day practice on Friday, the game, and then they're off Saturday morning to their next stop. What this is leading up to is they head to Australia then for another 5-game series, and then ultimately it's the World Cup that they're all leading up to, which is going to be in China this fall.
Right. Okay. So that's right before the season starts for all these NBA players.
Yeah.
You talk about depth. And I have doing a little bit of research behind the camera, Adam. That 17 and under team has depth in Fredericton, New Brunswick, the men's 17U. They've got, I think, 11 or 12 players, 6 of them in double digits, and most of their scoring in both games. Now, both the 15s and the 17Us are 2-0 starts. They both took on Newfoundland and New Brunswick. Now they play somebody else in their third game. What have you noticed in the 15U and 17U teams that have really kept a good balance out in New Brunswick for these nationals?
Well, it's both squads. This is our boys teams that are right now in Fredericton in the Canada Basketball National Championships. Both squads, very high energy group guys. In my unbiased opinion, both very well coached to get the most out of both teams. We did have some, which is always a nice way to start a tournament. Both those provinces, New Brunswick, Newfoundland, you mentioned, can be surprises. You sometimes never know who you're going to face until they show up. But we had some good opening 2 days there. Our 17 boys play Ontario tonight, which is always tough. They're the perennial favorites, no matter what, basically probably whatever sport you are at the national level. So that's going to happen this evening. Again, those games can be watched live. Streamed online. You can find the links on our website, basketballmanitoba.ca. But both teams exciting to watch, move the ball a lot, and really there's a lot. Like you said at the start, they're both pretty deep teams. There's not one player that dominates and one player that does everything for the team. It's nice to have those at times, but of course it's a team sport, and you're only as strong as that as your weakest link. So it's nice to see that both squads are quite deep, and anybody can really step up, and they're definitely gonna have to do that tonight against Ontario. Yeah,
and so the 15Us take on Nova Scotia, another Atlantic province. So it could be kind of like the same streamline for them for the 15s. And like you said, Ontario's got that hotbed, and anywhere Toronto area, there's loads and loads of talent there. So good luck for both squads tonight for sure.
That's right. And Nova Scotia can be a surprise as well.
That's right.
They've actually the last, I think it's 2 out of 3 years at the 17U level have won the national championship. So they're definitely on an uptick. So both our teams have their work cut out for them, but they're on a good pace right now.
Fabulous. So, and the female squads are in Victoria, British Columbia, you said, right?
Yeah, same events, just on the other side of the country. Our 15U girls and 17U girls are again going on today. All games can be streamed live. Links on our website. Our 15U girls are 1-on-1 right now. They actually lost almost a buzzer beater last night to Nova Scotia, which is again one of the favorites. So they were right up with them. And our 17U girls have a little bit of a tougher start. They're 0-2 right now. Had some bigger competition to start the tournament, and have 2 games today. They're actually playing as we speak right now, and again later on this evening. So again, all links are on our web.
Right. So is it normal to, like, how does that draw actually begin? Is it something that you just hope for the best and see, or is it based on Eastern versus Western, or how do they set the draw up for those?
Well, the teams are seeded based on last year's results. This is an annual tournament. So again, first champion from last year, your number 1 seed, right through to the 10 seed or 11 seed, depending on if there's a territory team involved or not. And then what they use, and this is boys and girls, young and old, what they use is a power pool model. Okay. And what that does, it takes the top 4 teams and puts them in their own pool, and the bottom 6 or 7 teams in their own pool in the bottom. And from there, they play a quick round robin amongst each other, and then that seeds the bracket 1 through 8, and then the bottom teams 9, 10, 11 usually are in their bottom bracket from the round robin. So our goal is to be a top 4 finisher. So actually, the games today for most of our teams is that critical. Probably if you were to calculate the most important game of the tournament, minus of course the championship, if you make it that far, is the game that's being played. The games that are being played today, because that will be determining if we're either on the medal side of the game or in the not medal side. So that's today's games are big ones against tough competition, and that's for all 4 of our teams. So yeah, it's usually midweek, sort of Wednesday is the critical game that that's the must-win game we got to see.
Perfect. We talked about depth. Representation of Manitoba players is very evident on all 6 teams, 15, 16s, and 17U. A lot of the city is represented. Even the rural areas are represented. Players from as north as Thompson, as east and west as Brandon. I mean, it's a good representation of a province as a whole, playing great basketball together on a team, and how they're able to put that together with, like you said, great coaching, Adam, is pretty impressive.
Yeah, it's and that's important to us. We want to make sure we represent as best we can. The fact we can pull players from all parts of the province to put our best foot forward is critical, and it's to us, these games, these championships are very important to our overall big picture of our sport. It's a great barometer as well to sort of see how our best match up against the best from other provinces as well. We have sort of like-sized provinces that we want to ensure that we compete very well against. Things like our neighbors to the west, Alberta and Saskatchewan are probably our biggest rivals, and then take care of the provinces from Eastern Canada, and then the tougher ones are, of course, the larger sized provinces. I mentioned Ontario, Quebec is always very strong, and British Columbia. And so the fact if we can play in the top 4 of that and sort of be in the mix of an Ontario, Quebec, BC, and Manitoba in that top 4 mix, that to us is a mission accomplished. And anything beyond that to say a silver medal or even a gold medal is a complete bonus.
How does the process for developing these teams start? It never ends, really, because you're constantly reviewing the talent pool for each age group, correct? So, I mean, whether they play high school, whether they play 4A, 3A, is that still, something they continually watch as a scouting group for Basketball Manitoba, or is it more the coaching staff that does that themselves and progress with making the team each year?
Yeah, it's a mix of both coach development, because that's important, very important to the overall health of our sport, not just at this level, but all levels of the game. And then ultimately the early identification and development of our athletes. Typically that starts, again, really there's no bottom age, but most of that usually starts around that 12-year-old mark of an athlete to sort of see where their potential could be. Sometimes you got to look in the crystal ball and look forward and say that this player may have potential for say athletic ability or size or skill. So that's sort of the early stages. We run what's called our Center for Performance program. We're rebranding and actually calling the TAP program, which is short for Targeted Athlete Program. We're just changing that actually as of this year. But it's more of just an early identification, training development opportunity for athletes roughly at these same ages, but our provincial team is predominantly 15, 16, and 17-year-olds, but we do start them a little younger in the TAP program, going as young as that 11, 12, and then growing up from there.
Perfect. So we talked the 15s, the 17s. They're in play currently. We now have the 16U males and females heading to Swift Current, Saskatchewan, right near Moose Jaw. Not really, but close anyway. I like just saying Moose Jaw. They leave tomorrow. They start their round robin play on Saturday. It's a round robin format where each team plays each other, and then they'll be seeding afterwards based on win losses and point diff, correct?
Right. Yes, and that starts up on Saturday. Our teams are leaving tomorrow, and this is only an event that happens every 4 years. It's not an annual event, so every 4 years we put together a 16U team to represent our province at the Western Canada Summer Games. And Swift Current Saskatchewan is our wonderful host for this year. We're always looking forward to it. Again, it does boost our rivalries amongst our western neighbors. Probably Alberta would be usually the team that we would look to be beating. Saskatchewan's usually quite strong. There's the Yukon Territory puts a team in as well. They can always be a mystery team. You sort of don't know what to expect with them. But it's another opportunity for 24 of our athletes and 6 more coaches at both for boys and girls combined to have an extended summer to develop. What's great about the timing of this for the 16-year-olds is that next summer, 2 summers from now, this is an early identification for our Canada Games, which we just hosted here 2 years ago. It feels like it just happened in Winnipeg, but that's again these 2 events leapfrog each other. So in 2021, we'll be sending a 17-year-old team to Niagara Falls, Ontario, is where that's being hosted. So this is a good early identification because it's a mix of 15-year-olds on this team as well, of the 16-year-old team. So there'll be 17 come 2 years from now. So it gives that extra base, a little bit more depth. That's a word we've used a few times in this conversation, to keep that base of athletes and coaches too. They definitely a team I think is only as good as the strength of their coaching staff. And this gives our coaches a little taste and the athletes a taste of a multi-game experience, because this is not just a basketball event where the other 2 I mentioned, the 17s and 15s in Fredericton and Victoria, are just a basketball event. The 16U is a multi-sport event, which is sort of a version of a Western Canada version of an Olympics, a mini Olympics. So it does have that extra pieces around with opening and closing ceremonies and the other sports that are all part of this sort of Team Toba environment. So it's great to have basketball part of that.
Exactly. And it's a pretty cool experience when you get to see that quasi-style Olympic setting for the close to 300 athletes representing our province. So having basketball invited for this is pretty cool.
Always is, yeah.
No shortness of depth is your website. You guys are well on top of everything. I could find everything on it. Basketballmanitoba.ca, correct?
Yeah, that's the place. And follow us on our social media as well, which is where you can find even more current information. We're very active on those platforms as well and stay in the loop.
Yeah. How important is it to have the Sport Manitoba building and Basketball Manitoba in the same area in terms of resources for coaches, athletes, and player and practice facilities, basically, and training facilities?
Well, yeah, I mentioned the Canada Games that were here just 2 years ago, and one of the major legacy items that was left behind from that Games was the namesake building that I'm in actually right now, called the Canada Games Sport for Life Center. And prior to that, we were just an administration office where, yes, we could still support resource-wise information, but if an athlete were to walk into our space prior to 2 years ago, physically here in this space, we could not help them. Now, with what's happened with the growth of the center, and Sport Manitoba has been wonderful in taking the lead on this, it's basically become a one-stop shop. There's the gymnasium space, which 99% of all of our programming now runs out of. The only time we got to go somewhere else is if either the program itself is too large to fit in under one roof here. But we've got 3 full FIBA-sized basketball courts that are available to us, and it's very basketball friendly in there. There's the Sport Manitoba Clinic, which is a physiotherapy space with sport medicine doctors and other resources right on site if and when an athlete were to need to take care of any injuries or other issues tied to that. And then there's the high performance training space, which has world-class professionals that can provide extra off-court support for our athletes and our coaches to get the most out of out of themselves. So yeah, for us to have this in the center of the city here, basically at our disposal is we're just really starting to really sense and see the spin-offs of this, and it's going to definitely be. We always look at say an event or a person as sort of I used that term earlier, the high watermark of say like a Raptor win or a Canada hosting a national team game here or whatever. But the legacy that was left from the Canada Games here, you really can't put. It's hard to put that into words, because we're really going to start seeing the culture of the game, and all those other sports, of course, are sensing this too. The culture of basketball really grow around this center here.
Yeah, I drive by it every day, and I can't remember what it was like without seeing the Sport for Life building near Disraeli and Maine. And it's like I'm trying to remember what was there, but I don't. But
it was a muddy hole of a parking lot.
Pretty much, yeah.
So it wasn't much to look at or even do anything with. So
yeah,
wonderful use of space.
Great space, high dividends. I think that's the one thing that for every sport and any athlete that requires any type of assistance or resource, it is a great central hub to have. Adam, I know you're a busy man. You got lots to look forward to come Friday night, and obviously the Western Canada Summer Games starting up here on this weekend. Thank you for joining me. Great to touch base with August, and we'll look forward to next month, the beginning of school and the beginning of. We'll see what programs and what teams and what schools are going to be ranked in the top 10 after they put them all together.
Yeah, new season's not that far away, so great to connect with you. Thanks.
Perfect, Adam. Have a great rest of the week, and enjoy Friday night.
Super. Thanks.
Thank you. This has been Theo with Amateur Sports TV, catching up with Adam Wedlake on the court with Basketball Manitoba. Thanks for joining us. Take care.